thank you for joining us in Dairy Dialogues. Phil, thank you for making time, and Samarth, you too as well. It's not often that we connect a world like this. Phil's in Wisconsin, I'm in Chicago, and Samarth is in busy Dubai. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
Great to be here.
Likewise. Thank you. So the format that we have followed in this is the ability for us in the Jordbrukare Daily Dialogues team and also our viewers to learn the market and dairy from your lens. And part of that lens and the journey of that lens is understanding why you are in dairy, what got you to dairy, and how did you make it to yesterday. And then if something about yesterday and today is really exciting because you're still here, and here we are. So what about that is exciting to you? And then we'll get a little bit into the future. So maybe we start, Phil, since you are the Hall of Fame person as far as we are in dairy, you've been in dairy longer than all of us combined, although we've been probably drinking and eating dairy quite long, but you've been in this market. So why don't we start with you? What got you interested into dairy? Why dairy? You've been here for so many years. So just walk us through your path so far.
Yeah, I mean, a series of accidents have gotten me here, delightful accidents. I was a commodity exchange marketing guy. And in 1993, somehow found myself in charge of the marketing and education efforts around the launch of dairy futures. That was what was then the Coffee, Sugar, and Cocoa Exchange, which was in New York, became the New York Board of Trade, is now basically ICE. And so my job was to get people interested in dairy futures. And, you know, the dairy markets in the United States and globally, really, for that matter, had not been very exciting for a long, long, long time. If you were to look at the long-term price charts in the US, we didn't have much price volatility because the government provided a lot of insulation.
Yeah.
Then the late 80s happened and we had Chernobyl and other things going on, the retreat of government price supports in the US, and all of a sudden volatility emerged. Yeah. And out of that came the need, volatility creates opportunity and risk. Okay. And out of that, there was an appetite for centralized dairy commodity type markets. And the exchanges are always interested in, what's next. Right. And coffee, sugar, and cocoa is a logical place because the confectioners, the Hershey's, the Marses, those types of people buy a lot of dairy. And they're like, hey, this is becoming a problem, help us. And so, that started my journey. What I found was that the people in the industry were tremendously friendly. Yeah. And there was endless sort of intellectual, if I'm intellectually curious, and there was endless things to be curious about. Correct. But in the early days, we could have been, we had these meetings and we could have been talking about alien space landings and it would have had the same kind of, right. And the people were like, oh, that's really interesting. Come back. Not like, what are you talking about? Go away. Like, I think this matters. I don't exactly understand what you're saying, but we'd love you to come back and tell us more. Of course. And so, after a little bit of, after kind of going around a few times on that, I decided, to go into private practice, if you will. I mean, I couldn't help people. I could only lead them to the water and you need an actual broker or someone, to actually get them to drink. And so I got on that. I got on that side of the business. And look, it could be because I'm not bright, but I still learn stuff every day. I find the dairy industry, the food industry, endlessly fascinating. There's a lot of moving pieces. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is I take I don't want to overstate my firm's importance to the world, but we do play even a little infinitesimal role in the miracle of getting food from farm to fork. And, to walk in the grocery store and say, I kind of know, I know more about this product than most people care to know. Yeah. But, I helped with that a little bit, right? I mean, it's a source of tremendous pride. And I think it's a force for good.
I think so. And I think also the part you're mentioning is there is never scarcity of things to be curious about. And I would argue that the less people know about things, the more there is to be curious about. And I think dairy is a phenomenal place to act in that. So Samarth, will shift to you. So Phil lives in Wisconsin. Phil lives and breathes milk. You are from India. You're from the same place I am from. All right. So did you get drunk one night and decide to get into dairy next day, or how did that happen?
No, I kind of hoped it was that story because that would have been really cool. But unfortunately, it wasn't that story. I wasn't drunk. I was in my senses. So, Anup, a day was never a plan for me. I did my engineering from RV College of Engineering, Bangalore. I'm not sure if you've heard of that college.
I do.
And, the idea, I'm a techie. I love building tech products. I'm really curious about technology and how technology can change lives. And building solutions is a passion for me. And this one fine day, I was back home, in between those college breaks. And my mother asked me, she was like, listen, can you ask the milkman to not deliver milk the next day? And I was like, that's fine. I woke up at, I think, about 6 a.m. I opened the door, the milk was already there. I did
Right.
it the next day again. I woke up at 5, the milk was there. I woke up at 4, the milk was there. Somehow, every time I woke up as early as I could, the milk was there. Finally, I caught hold of him. And I asked him, what time do you deliver? And he was like, I do it at 3 a.m. And, I get the milk at 12 in the night. And that's how I do it. And, I was just imagining, why isn't there a way that I can switch off milk subscription the way I snooze my alarm? Why can't it be that simple? And at that moment, there was no option. So as a college project, we just built an application, not being focused in the dairy sector. Again,
Right.
the focus was just building some tech around things and solving problems that we saw. That idea just came and became Mr. Milkman. It was just turning a local milkman who does not understand technology into a smart, much more advanced Mr. Milkman. That's why we were being smart ourselves, attaching a Mr. to a milkman, thinking that we did a very good job with the name. But
Right.
yeah, so that's how it all started. One thing led to another. We started our own logistics. We started delivering milk ourselves. We raised
Wow.
some funding. And we realized, I don't want to use that word, but we messed up. The unit economics aren't there. You can't really make money in milk delivery if you're dealing as a retailer, honestly.
Right.
Because
Right.
the margins in India, especially when it comes to milk, are wafer thin. There's next to no margin in milk. I mean, you understand milk markets well.
I have a news item for you.
Yeah.
That's why it's called margin. It's thin everywhere. It's the margin. It's not the bulk. Anyway, yes.
It's never enough. But yeah, so we realized our unit economics wasn't in place. We were not making money with every delivery that we were making with some of these major brands. I don't want to name those brands, but some of these major brands, they don't give enough margin, and we were not making that money. So after almost a year of operations, we decided it's time to shut down. Even though we had about $1.5 million worth of funding in hand, we had some commitments in hand. We didn't want to cheat our investors saying that, oh, you know what, we can get that money and then play around with no unit economics. No, it did not make sense to us. So we said no to them and we decided to shut down the operations. But it was when we were doing that, a brand we were discussing with and working with just came to settle the account. And I had opened my dashboard in front of him. And he said, Samarth, what are you using? What software is this? He named a particular platform that's very well known. And I said, no, it's not that. We have built this on our own. And he said, Samarth, since you're shutting down your operations, why don't you give us this software? We are managing all our operations, lakhs of liters every day on Excel. We don't know how many liters are going into the market, how many crates are going, what leakages are there. We don't have that data. We are relying on people. And you know how it is when you rely on people and everything is being crunched on Excel. And we did a pilot with them. We said, okay, you know what? We have built a platform that can accept orders. We have built a platform that tracks deliveries, logistics, confirmations, online payments, invoicing, everything. Give it a try. They loved it. One thing led to another. They referred us to 2 more. Then those referred us to more. We did not do a single marketing activity. And we were almost working with 15 good to large brands across India using our platform to manage their entire operations. From shutting down, we went to 15 to 50 to a profitable company. And then eventually, that's how I got into the sector. This was never planned. It was just one thing leading to another.
And I think those are one of the best stories as you follow, the opportunity in front of you. You keep engaged. You don't run away from the opportunity. You don't complain of noise when opportunity knocks at your door. Oh, that's fascinating. Wonderful. So, Samarth, now, when it comes to India dairy, people like me have some opinions. For simple reason is the India we grew up in is not the same as it is today. And somehow our dumb brains are still stuck that, no, well, this is how it is. No, it was 30 years ago when you lived there, not anymore. And the other thing I wanted to also, this is a hour of stories. So your milk was delivered in front of your doorstep at 3 a.m. in the morning. The part of India that I grew up in, the milk was delivered by the cow. So village where I grew up in, Phil, and Samarth can relate to this, maybe not you, but we'll just test you with this. So the village I grew up in, there were 6 or 7 cows. This one guy owned these 6 or 7 cows, and the cows would go graze the entire day. And in the evening, on the way back, the cows would stop in front of your house, and you go out with a saucepan, and he would milk the cow into your saucepan. And there was a notebook which we wrote. Yeah, in the notebook, we would write how many kilos a liter or whatever the heck it was. And I would bring the milk in, Phil, and my mother would say the milk, in India, we drank hot milk.
Okay.
Right? So the milk out of the cow was hot. And my mother was like, well, there's no point heating it. Why don't you just drink it? So actually, I grew up drinking raw milk in India. So you couldn't shut that milk off, Samarth. So that's my, relationship with milk. Although that's not why I got into the milk business, but I got into milk because I married into the milk family. My in-laws are dairy farmers in Vermont. So that's how I got into it. And my big aha moment, Phil calls himself dumb until I trump him and I'll become the more dumber version of Phil, is that, so the first time I stepped into a dairy barn, Phil, was 2010. And I have a very puzzled look on my face, and my then girlfriend's dad, now my father-in-law, looks at me and says, what's the problem? So I'm like, I'm just realizing cows give milk on Sundays. Because I came from, at the time, I was in the oil business. You could shut the well off if you wanted to. And I said, well, and also I'm realizing that you are a price taker, not a maker. Like these two big epiphanies happening in the dairy barn, surrounded by 400 cows. I'm like, wow, how little I understand this. Anyway, good. So moving to the present, Samarth, in your mind, in India dairy, and in the context, when I say India, broadly Asia dairy, where do you see the business? Meaning, where is the consumer? Where is the supplier? What is interesting about it? I find it's massively interesting because you have, 4 billion people with massive logistics, freshness, traffic, all these problems, and they all need to get fed. How do you see that sitting in that market?
So honestly, what I have seen over the last 6 years in this business is that dairy sector is highly unorganized in India. Unorganized to the point that people are still operating on pen and paper, sometimes based on just their memory that, okay, I need to go to this market, I need to talk to this retailer. Everything is just so manual at the moment.
Yeah.
And that is where the opportunity really lies. And not just for us, any technology player, whether dairy or not, has a huge opportunity to digitize this sector from one end to another. Yeah. Even though there are many players in the market today who have digitized, let's say, the farm operations to a certain extent. There are few who have digitized the distribution from the farm to the processing plant to a certain extent. There are players who are digitizing the processing plant, but the interconnectivity of all these solutions is not there even still. And that is also another place where the opportunity lies, because the moment the data starts to flow from the point the production is taking place all the way to the consumption, that is where this industry is going to transform and the real money is going to come in for the producer, which does not exist in the Indian market today.
Right.
And the reason it does not exist in the Indian market today is because of the loss throughout in the value chain, where people are losing money because of leakages of product, because of lack of cold chain and lack of interconnectivity of data. That is where. Sorry, Phil, were you saying something?
No, I was going to ask you a question if it's okay. So
yeah, of course.
If I hear you right, I mean, it's almost as just given where India is and its evolution of dairy, it's almost like is it almost like the technology can enable scale in a way that hasn't been? I mean, yes. We had scale in America kind of before we had technology for any number of different reasons. We had 400 cow dairies or whatever. But I mean, do you see that technology as being a way that's going to engender scale in a way that hasn't been possible before?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe that India hasn't even touched what it can achieve. And in terms of the dairy sector, even though India today is the largest producer and consumer of milk in the world, it is yet to achieve the status that it can in terms of the volumes, in terms of consumption. India, let's be honest, loves milk. Whether it's in the form of value-added products, it's in the form of ghee, and the reason behind it is because milk is the source of protein that even the poorest of poor wants, right, or can afford, and that is why the prices are also to a certain extent kept affordable in the Indian market for everybody to be able to afford that source of protein. And India really loves milk, so we do see the growth in the Indian market to continue the way it is at the moment. And that too significantly, it's going to just, the technology is going to act as a catalyst in the situation, where it's going to trigger the growth and, for India to achieve its potential when it comes to the dairy sector.
So Phil, I have a question for you on this. So you have been observing dairy broadly for decades now. And then at some point before you interacted with Samarth and the team got acquired, you probably had a view on India. And now with somebody from India, it's probably helped educate and inform, your opinions. I want to parallel track. I connected with Indian dairy as an industry not too long ago. And there were a lot of aha moments for me. Now, part of the aha moments was out of my own ignorance when I was growing up in India and my understanding of that. But from a broad spectrum standpoint, how has your opinion or your understanding of a market like India? What were the surprises? What were not surprises? Just give us your comic relief on your understanding of India.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you read a little bit or are marginally informed, it's like, yeah, it's an informal industry, and people have 4 cows and all those things, and I think that it's to kind of say, well, yeah, and that's kind of true, right? I mean, it's like, it's not just sort of like this sort of I mean, I think even though I knew it was informal, I think the disaggregation and the informality of the industry is still a surprise when you see it a little bit up closer.
Yes.
And of course, that's all, for what Samarth is doing, what other people are going to be doing in India. It's all upside, right? At the end of the day, you look at it and say, even a modest amount of consolidation, a modest amount of leveraging technology, a modest amount of evolution, and you can make huge gains.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to understand better going forward the barriers, right? I mean, because so maybe we don't have the right technology. We need to do better with technology. That's one thing that's easy to say, right? But then how do you do it? And then scale is both. It's sort of a seductress on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's sort of daunting, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, well, billions. Well, okay, I mean, that's exciting, but then how do you take what is a hugely disaggregated industry at just about every stop of the supply chain, or many stops of the supply chain, and then actually get that scale, build out to that scale, or capture those scale efficiencies and opportunities. And I think that, again, I've not been on the ground, and I know at a very, very superficial level some of these things, but I think that's what's exciting for me and for us is, there's a reason why, we've, and maybe we've come a long way already in India, but there's a reason why it's still informal, right?
Yeah.
And, understand that informality is something that I need to, we've understood a little bit more here lately. But understanding what that means in terms of what you can reasonably do in a reasonable amount of time is very interesting and intriguing to me. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, one question I will ask you, and then we'll go to Samarth again. To the extent that you can share, how did you, as a business, evaluate and decide to make such a big financial, investment commitment to a market like India, given its informality and given the barriers, or there's some opaqueness?
Well, sure. I think that for us, I think operating at something that's much closer to the consumer than, we have a lot of B2B business type applications and solutions in our world. I think having something that's much more B2C flavored was intriguing. I think that the opportunity to work with someone like Samarth, who's energetic and on the cusp and on the edge, you just don't find that every day. And so, from a risk reward perspective, or however we want to measure it, I think that it allows us to, because you start thinking, well, okay, it's not crazy to think that what Samarth has landed on here has broader applications than just in India. Yeah. And whether that means it's whether you take it to other countries, right? I mean, if you say, hey, where's there a disaggregated industry with a lot of potential? I would say Poland, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right. It's one you've heard of. It's like, well, do these things that might, I don't think it's an India specific thing. And look, I don't have a marketing plan here that says we're taking this to Poland, but I just think that it's not like, oh, we're going to come to the US with this necessarily, or maybe, but I think that there's universal, it's not just that, if it works in India, it'll work elsewhere also. Yes. And I think that's exciting for a company that is trying to be more global, trying to be more diverse in who we touch, and always, and in our current construction, we are looking to power people that, when I sold my business to dairy.com, whatever, 8 or 9 years ago, I needed a bigger platform.
Yeah.
And everything we buy, or, the things that we were doing, it's great ideas. They're great businesses, but they need a better platform or a bigger platform. And so, to look at where Samarth is operating, what the technology is, and what he can do with that platform, is really exciting. But I think that B2C thing is really intriguing.
Absolutely. And one connection I will make, and Samarth will then jump on you on this one, is when I reconnected with India, specifically around dairy, the thing that jumped into my head, and it was a series of accidental conversations, is what Phil just said, the fragmented nature of India. What was intriguing to me is you have 1 billion people, as you said, Samarth, and they all love milk. I think milk is they love milk, and there's some interesting, chicken and egg stories here, but net is milk is a source of protein for a broadly vegetarian, demographics, right? So how can you have 1 billion people and still have this fragmented supply chain or supply, source, if you will, for something that's elemental to day-to-day survival, right? I mean, so that was the massive intellectual curiosity that sucked me into it. And then, Phil, what I came out on the other side with is the part that you were saying, which is where does this model actually also work, is when I started to think about, what is a product and what's a service? And what came to my mind was, in India, or not India, any place with limited cold chain, fluid milk is a service. It is not a commodity. We think here is a commodity because we can manage, a box of milk moving from the West Coast to the East Coast. But they can't manage, a box of milk moving from, Chicago to Wisconsin. So fluid milk is a service. I don't know, Samarth, react to that. Tell me how you dice this problem set.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's less of a commodity and more of a service, and with a lot of stakeholders involved over here, right? Because to ensure that the milk reaches from the producer to every household, one way or the other, whether it's through, whether we are talking about tier 2, tier 3 cities or villages. Somehow in villages, though, many have their own cattle and they are producing their own milk, but many times they don't. In harsh environments, they usually don't. And for milk, that too in a pasteurized form, to reach there is actually a service. So Anup, you consumed raw milk, right? But raw milk consumption can be very dangerous if the cold chain is not maintained, right? And it can lead to much more problems.
I consume raw milk and I have horns coming out of my head. Yes.
No, but it's actually very dangerous. It can be. I mean, again, as long as the cold chain is maintained, it can be good for you. But if it's not maintained, then it can be really bad for you. And to be able to maintain that, and in order to provide that milk to door, whether through direct to consumer or through retail outlets, is actually a service. Yeah.
And I think that's what makes your model, and I say your model, the model, applicable to many, many places. Now, Samarth, in India, the question that makes me always curious, we always use the government and regulations as a nice, easy scapegoat. Anything that we get frustrated with, like, no, those buggers, because of them, we can't do anything. Give us a flavor of how true or incorrect is that? Because I also think, Phil, there's an interesting connection I made, is the Indians and I'm going to make a word, and we can always edit it if it doesn't fit. The Indians and the Caucasians have one thing in common: milk. We eat milk here. India drinks milk, right? But we still consume milk, and there's no two races that are this close when it comes to eating habits that I've found. And I'm the test. I spent 20 years there, 25 years here, well, 25 and 50. So I can attest to that. That's one interesting part of that. Yep. Now, having said that, I mean, right. And second connection between India and America is there are no two countries where we have so many entrepreneurs. I mean, US, we're all entrepreneurs. Go to India, and every guy who owns a small tea shop is an entrepreneur. That's his own business. So entrepreneurism and this connection is very common between these two cultures. So with that, walk us through, Samarth. What is your thinking of what is the barrier? I have some ideas of what the barriers are. I don't think they're regulation, but give us a sense of what do you think it is?
So you're saying barriers in terms of entrepreneurship or in terms of dairy as a business?
India as a business, and why dairy is still fragmented. What is holding back? Is it lack of vision? Is it, the government is not helping? Like, what is it?
So first of all, I completely disagree that the government is not helping. Whoever says that the government is not helping really is just escaping what the fact is, right?
Good.
So the government is doing all that the government can. Entrepreneurship has nothing to do with government.
Yeah.
Yes, government does bring in opportunities. Agreed, right? Sure. Some opportunities are there, but from the Indian perspective, India has all the opportunities that an entrepreneur could find. There are so many problems out there to solve, and every problem is an opportunity in disguise.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's so many. It's just taking that first step, right? You have to take that first step. There's funding available like never before.
Right.
Investors are throwing in money if you want to start a business. Sure. Yes, actually, that business needs to make sense. It's not that you can just come up with some nonsense and expect money to come your way. That's not going to happen. That used to happen in 2015 and 2014, not now.
Really? We missed that. We should have been in India at the time.
So,
anyway, sorry.
But yeah, all opportunities available. And, it's all about taking that first step and taking the risk to get started. Some people are lucky. Yes, I agree. I personally feel I was lucky, right? Because, when your family is supportive, that yes, you want to take that risk, you take that risk. I did not get into my first job. I straight away jumped into, starting this up. And you need to have some form of support from your family in order to do that. Not many people have that. Now, that's the biggest barrier that I see in India, that not many families can support or have their children just simply jump into entrepreneurship, not make money for a very long period of time, focus on that, because financial crunch is a big problem in India. It is. That is the only barrier I see. Otherwise, there is no other barrier that I see.
Is there something about the intersection of agriculture and technology that's interesting and challenging, whether it's dairy or, I think what I heard you say is that, the government's supporting entrepreneurs. Great. But is there something that either is, jangly or different when you start bringing agriculture into the mix and food, or is it all systems go on all fronts?
No, there are a few challenges when it comes to agriculture and entrepreneurship when you mix these two, right? The first challenge that I would say is the market, right? When you're into the agricultural entrepreneurship, or specifically agri-tech side of it, not just agriculture. If I say agri-tech, your market is mostly farmers, right? Yeah. And when your market is farmers, that is where you have the biggest challenge, is how to get them to use your tech product when most of them do not understand technology themselves. Right? Or education is a big problem. Literacy is a big problem. English is a problem. When people think about technology, they usually think about, okay, there's going to be an app. There's going to be some software. It's going to be in English, right? It's less of a service, more of a tech platform that people think when they say agri-tech. And when you're launching, a tech platform, the adoption by somebody who might be living on a 2G network even though there are 5G in city, is very difficult. You cannot have, a farmer just open an app and surf through, let's say, services available. It's not that easy. People think it's easy. They say that, oh, there are millions of farmers in India, and we're going to launch an app and all those farmers are going to download and subscribe to our service. Many of them do not have a bank account,
Sure.
or a credit card or a debit card to even make an online payment for a service. And
or
that's where
even
economics,
or even receive money. Forget paying, even receive money. Yeah.
Exactly. And if they're dealing with cash, and the moment you start dealing with cash in a tech service, your unit economics is going to go everywhere. You're not going to make money. So if you're launching a tech product and there's so many operations going on the ground, that's where you really lose the market. And that's where the investors also lose the market or the interest in products like that. That is the challenge when it comes to agri and entrepreneurship coming together.
Having said that, Phil, there's a term I learned last year talking to somebody like Samarth in India, which I thought was very intriguing. They referred to dairy as a daily velocity crop. Right? Think about it. These are.
I mean, right? We talk about it. Even in hugely developed markets or whatever, right? Perishability and portability are huge issues.
Correct.
And again, on the one hand, there's huge opportunity because we need better tools for logistics and movement and tracking and all those things. On the other hand, it's really daunting because as you learned in a Vermont dairy barn, we're open for business on Sunday too, right? So it's all the time, right? And the stakes are high.
Yeah.
And so that's the velocity. Again, I think that there's huge opportunity in working through that, but it does make it daunting. And you just can't say, well, this didn't work today, we'll get back to it tomorrow. Where maybe you could imagine, if you had a failure of some sort to get corn from a silo to a market because the tech broke down, you live another day.
Yeah.
When it comes to dairy, you don't, you might have a day, but the clock is always ticking. And so, that's a challenge worldwide. And I think it's, it's an area of fascination for me, even in the United States, where we're going from an environment where more people are ordering food from DoorDash. Well, okay. Or more people are ordering stuff from we're going to go click and collect at the grocery store. How does perishability play in that? How does portability play in that? I think those are core dairy issues. Even to the point of it dictates a lot of our regulation, right?
Yeah.
Perishability is a huge deal. So I think, getting UHT milk direct from the cow and getting them to take Sundays off could be where we need to direct our entrepreneurial energy, because that would be something.
That is true. That is true. So, Samarth, based on where you are today, how do you? And I would not ask a stupid question like, "Oh, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Screw that. Where do you see the Asian dairy segment opportunities for the next lifetime? Because the way we see that, I'll help you a little bit here, is that the way we see that is in Southeast Asia. In my team, we call that monsoon economies. So monsoon economies, is a lot of rainfall, a lot of good soil, good weather. So fertility, both land and human fertility, is high. The way we think about this is we're going to add a new Malaysia to the entire monsoon economies in the next 10 years. And if you relate to that in terms of you adding a Malaysia or Indonesia, you change how you think about demand there, right? And not just demand, commercially, but demand for nutrition, demand for food, demand for living. And that's where, the favorable demographics economically is going to show up, which gets me insanely excited about it. And then moment I think about it, then the inertia then goes, okay, now how do we make it happen, right? And there's this big vacuum between the two. So tell me, how are you thinking about it, and what is it? What is it that keeps you excited about this? Not in the here and now. Here and now, of course, you have your plate's full, but beyond that.
So one thing that I'm really excited and looking forward to in the market, specifically in the Asian market, is the consolidation of the dairy sector. So if you look at it from the current scenario, as Phil also mentioned, it's very fragmented. right? In India specifically, if I talk about purely India, there's so many small farms, and every farm is working independently, milking cows, going to a collection center, delivering over there. It's working in such an inefficient manner, and it cannot sustain in that manner for long. Eventually larger farms are going to take over, or these farms are going to come together to create some form of a coalition, right? And all of them are going to be working together. So that efficiency is something that I'm really looking forward to, which does not exist today, and that can happen through consolidation. And that consolidation is going to happen throughout Asia. But at the same time, if you think about it, there's not enough land. People are growing, population is increasing. You don't really have the option to have large pastures, right? Where there are hectares and hectares of land where cattle are just grazing and relaxing and chilling. So what I'm really looking forward to and seeing, how is it gonna be in the next 4 to 5 years if there's not enough land? How are the farms gonna be? There are gonna be new technologies coming in. You've seen how vertical farming has started in the agriculture.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing some innovation in dairy sector in that direction as well. And how do you make sure that the cattle is also in a very comfortable environment, because you don't want animal cruelty in this particular case. And at the same time, there's consolidation, increase in efficiency to support the increase in demand that's happening across Asia. So that's something that really excites me, because technology can be implemented, but farm is something that really needs disruption.
Phil, on that token, back to you, the question that I have for you is, so, in commodity markets, we think of origins and destinations. And largely origins is places like the US, LATAM, things, we have more spaces, less people, so we can produce. You look at Southeast Asia, monsoon economies, it's the opposite. Now, trade regulations, trade barriers, I personally think that they are going to play a big role in helping this balance get more balance or get out of balance, whatever you want to put in the middle of that. There's some role of connecting the milk can, I was going to say bread basket, we have the milk can here, right? Mm-hmm. To the empty glass. What do you think?
And which direction are you thinking of it of?
So in the sense, as you think about it, so India, the milk price in India is about 3x that of the global milk price, right? And the driver there is there's a great deal of agrarian politics, I would say, that plays a big role in it, and not just India, anywhere in the world. Yep. Agrarian is a very sensitive. I think the only market that I've not seen or the least sensitivity of agrarian is actually Australia, where they treat the farmer just like an ordinary businessman as anybody else would. But the rest of the world has some, and that creates social and economic and more re-election barriers, right? There's that. Having said that, the reason the milk is probably 3-4 times the price in India, than here, is because of small farm economics and millions of other things. Now, if you really have to allocate capital efficiently, there's some energy flow you have to enable so the capital gets allocated efficiently. That's a very touchy discussion, perhaps. So speak, and we'll edit it if it doesn't fit.
Well, but I think when I first got into this business and did a project for somebody, and there was a Washington type guy. He said, "Hey, Phil, I'll give you a piece of advice: stay away from the white commodities; they're terrible. Sugar, cotton, rice, dairy, they're all political, problems, and so here I am. It's true." And I think it's a very, very delicate balance, right? Because you do have people's livelihoods on the one hand, right, and especially in where you haven't had a lot of consolidation. It's votes, right?
Absolutely,
they are legitimate large constituencies, and then food security is always right. Okay, so let's build a different system, and all of a sudden, someone has a hiccup and we don't have our own. Then what, right? And so I think I would see it as evolutionary more than revolutionary, right? And how do you go, 2 steps forward and 1 step back instead of 1 for 1 or 1 for 2, right? But I think we've seen in India over the years with SMP. Okay, we're worried, and so we're going to stockpile a bunch, and we're going to bring it in. Thank you. And then we're going to say, oh, wait, we're not going to bring any more in. And as a matter of fact, we're going to sell some off the
Yeah.
pile.
Correct.
And so I think it's hard to, I'd like to be optimistic about trade generally, because I think that is the direction we go in because of efficiency, because of, the weather's better in other places. There are other places that are better suited to grow this stuff.
Yes.
But when it comes right down to it, the very real politics of votes and, domestic economics, as well as food security, it becomes sort of I don't know that it's hard to imagine how it gets, dramatically faster and more open in that regard, even though as economists or analysts, we could sit back and say, well, hey, look, you take, if you spend, 2x instead of 3x, that other 1x is good for, win, 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 win. I just think that it's hard to bypass some very, very legitimate, I would say, and hardened positions and realities around, socioeconomic factors and major security issues, both financial and food right. No one wants to have food riots. And so I think that it's hard to, and we even see it here in the United States, right? I mean, things just get a little bit sideways and all of a sudden we go to Washington and say, help us. Right. And so, and I think it's reflexive and, it's human nature and it's politics. And so
yes.
I'm optimistic about the long arc of progress, but I'm, kind of realistic or maybe overly realistic about how fast it can all happen.
Yeah. So in closing, Samarth, the question I will ask you is, so if you look back, what will you tell yourself when you were coming out of college, knowing what you know today? So you are now, you've been doing this, you've been successful, you've turned the things around, you've found some new opportunities. Now look back and tell me, knowing what you know today, what will you tell the younger Samarth who just came out of college or was somewhere in college? What would you tell them?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is don't wait. I was so scared. I was so scared about starting up. You have no idea. Months and months of deliberation, months and months of just worrying or taking decisions. And now, when I think of it, it was all in vain. I just could have started much earlier. But you know what? Again, that's where the risk comes in, right? And that's where the fun part is.
Good.
It's all the uncertainty that comes along with it. And that's where the excitement also comes.
Phil, so on that one, the last question I'll ask you then is, what would you tell people coming out of college and about getting them excited about, being a contributor in the dairy, end-to-end chain, anywhere for that matter?
Yeah, I think it's a practical matter. I mean, if you're just, if you're sitting down with your kid and saying, let's dial in a career for you, son or daughter. The food industry is a great place to hide, right? I mean, it's a safe harbor from a lot of economic storms because people are going to eat, right? Sure. And so, as a very practical matter, it seems likely that there's going to be a lot of work in the food industry for a long time to come. But then I think that from a sexier perspective, it is vital, right?
Yeah. And
there are so many little pieces that go into that where you can make real contributions.
Sure.
And either directly influence or play a small part in, but that the stuff never ends, right? I mean, I married into a dairy family as well, and my brother-in-law just installed robotic milkers. You want to talk about a whole world of things. I was like, right? That you just never, when my wife was there on a 50 cow tie stall barn, right? It's an amazing, and this is, 2022, and who knows what's going to be in 2024, 2025. There's always more. And and if you start thinking about, okay, there's a farmer, there's a merchandiser, there's a processor, there's a wholesaler, there's a distributor, there's a retail grocery store chain, there's a restaurant chain. There's so many layers and pieces in the chain that there's always something interesting, always something meaningful, and always something needed in my estimation. So I just think that And then you can be a technologist, you can be a tech entrepreneur like Samarth, you can be a hack analyst like me, or right, there's it's not just like, oh, we need people with engineering degrees, or we need there's a whole breadth of talent and resources that are needed, and I think that need is perpetual.
Yeah.
So that would be my 2 cents.
Perfect. That's a great note to end the conversation at. Thank you so much for making time and hanging out with us. We hope to do this maybe more often than once in a lifetime. Hopefully this group, we connected once a year at least to cross-pollinate some ideas. Thank you very much for making time for us, Phil and Samarth.
Oh, it's great fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much.